President Tony, Madam President-to-be, Rotarians and guests. Flushed with the success of victory over arch-rivals Crusaders, it is my pleasure to welcome Conrad here today. Whilst Conrad comes from a family with a strong sporting pedigree, it was never his number one priority to become an All Black, let alone an outstanding one, over a tenure of 10 years and counting. He attended Francis Douglas College in New Plymouth from 1995 to 99, and whilst being in the first 15 of the school and also representing Taranaki secondary schools, he was not selected for New Zealand schoolboys, and nor did he play for any New Zealand age grade representative teams during his early years. He came to Wellington in the year 2000, primarily to pursue a law degree at Victoria University. He joined the prestigious OBU rugby club in that year. Thought that would get some applause. And played for several years at club level before he was selected for the Wellington provincial team in 2003. Such was his form that year, he was promoted to the Hurricanes in 2004. At the end of that year, he was selected to play or to tour in the All Blacks team to the UK and Europe, and he made his debut for the All Blacks against Italy in November 2004. In the meantime, Conrad completed his degree and through the good offices of Roger Drummond, worked part-time at Balgully and latterly at Gibson Sheet, a day a week to keep his hand in the law, so to speak, whilst pursuing his professional rugby career. Through sheer hard work and tenacity, Conrad has become a highly respected senior member of the All Black team and one who takes all the right options and shows incredible courage and leadership on the field. Conrad comes from a very strong and supportive family, with his dad having represented Taranaki at both rugby and cricket, his uncle Alan also playing both codes for Taranaki and was also an All Black in the 1960s, and another uncle, Walter, who represented Wellington Colts and Manawatu in the late 1960s, early 70s. With family genes of that order, Conrad was always going to be an outstanding sportsman. So I'd like to welcome you, Conrad, to address us on life as an All Black. Welcome, Conrad.
Thank you, Reece. It's a very warm welcome, and indeed it's an honour to speak at such a dignified group of people. I suppose one of the things about being a rugby player, you speak at many different audiences. I know when I first started out, being thrown into primary schools and ripper rugby teams, and having to talk to them, it was something that was actually quite daunting. I thought I'd be quite capable, having been through, as Reece said, getting a law degree. I thought I'll be comfortable in front of a group of people, but when they're 5-year-old kids and I was speaking at a level entirely above their heads, and it wasn't until I asked them how many Weet-Bix they had for breakfast that I actually got a response. So yeah, you learn, and obviously, and now speaking in front of an audience like this, it's all quite different, and I won't be talking about Weet-Bix, unless you want me to. But it is always, it is something I talk to Reece about. It's something difficult to know what to talk to you guys about. I'm happy to take questions at the end. I thought I'd talk about some of the World Cups, 2 World Cups that I've been involved in, and obviously one that's fast approaching in the middle of next year. And and in saying that, it's like Reece said, it all happened very quickly for me. And to even look back now and think that I've been involved in 2 World Cups and hopefully another one is something I never contemplated when I first came down to Wellington as a student, wanting to get a law degree and actually become a sports journalist. That was my first dream. Having met a few of them, I wonder why. But yeah, and also apologies. I've obviously had an injury. I do normally jot down a few notes when I talk, but writing's become quite difficult. So I've scribbled a few notes, and I'm happy to ramble on, and hopefully that'll fill up 10 or so, 15 minutes, and then we can have some questions. That should be good. But anyway, so for me, like Reece mentioned, I debuted in 04 and then went to my first World Cup in 2007, and most people probably look back at that not with the fondest memories. We obviously got knocked out in a quarter-final in that tournament, but I honestly look back and reflect on probably the best All Black team I was ever a part of, and it's funny to think of that in that way, but when I think, particularly in the years leading up, 2005, 2006, we went on a couple of India tours, and that was when the rotational policy was in vogue, and we were putting 30, 40 points on virtually every team we played, regardless of who we had, and we were making 13, sometimes 13 changes between games, and it really was a special bunch of guys, and I'll still look back on that, in the same way, even though we won a World Cup. To me, that tournament taught me more about what World Cups are and how you play them. It was no reflection of the group of players we had there. Like I said, it still is the best group of players, and the fact that we were picking the coaches had to pick a starting 15 every week and leave 3 or 4 All Black legends, past captains out of the lineup. That was just reflective of how good a squad we had back then. I think back to the game we lost. I think we had Anton Oliver, Reuben Thorne, Aaron Major, Doug Howlett. And they're all guys people argue should have been picked, but if you had picked them, you would have dropped. There was 50 Test All Blacks that were in their place in the team. It was just a very special group of players. And so it begs the question of obviously why we lost. And like I said before, it taught me, looking back on it now, it taught me what World Cups are. They're unique, they're a tournament, they're different than any other All Black season, they're different than what we face at the moment, even Super Rugby campaigns. They are unique, they're specific, and they pose a different set of skills than a normal season does. And I don't think All Black sides had probably realised that up until 2011, and it was a hard way for us to learn in 2007, but in a lot of ways we were a victim of our own success. I mentioned 2005, 2006, all the way we were winning and beating sides around the world. There was an environment, and it was a great environment, but we were, everyone was looking for a 1%er, ways to improve the team, and which is great as long as you don't lose sight of what our core role is. And I think, and we all agreed, looking back in the years that followed that World Cup, that maybe we did lose sight of, our job in essence is to win rugby games. And I remember a trainer saying at the time, we had Graham Lowe, who was our physical trainer, and he was doing amazing stuff, but it got to the point he was testing our saliva and blood, taking readings every morning, because he was testing testosterone levels, all this stuff, which was great, but he sort of after the World Cup looked back on it and said, I should have just been making us guys run fast and tackle hard. And I think that was, when we looked, like I say, when we did all the reviews, the coaches, they all sort of came to the same conclusion, because we'd gone through that tournament with 2 game plans. One, game plan that we were going to win the pool stages with, and then a whole other one that we were going to play the knockout games with. and we obviously didn't get too far ahead with those. But that's something, and in hindsight, well, we were able to look back on that, and I think that was the benefit, that we actually kept a coaching team and we didn't lose those lessons that we'd learned from 07. And then so moving into the 2011 World Cup, when we had a squad of players, admittedly that we were a good squad of players, but like I say, I still don't think we're as good a team. Certainly when you look at probably the 15 that played the World Cup final, we wouldn't be near, I wouldn't say near as good as the side that was playing in 2007. So, but we'd learned a lot of lessons, and going into the 2011 World Cup, I know, by that stage I was, playing a bit more regularly and within a leadership group, and we'd meet. I think it was about 2 years out from that World Cup, we were starting to meet and talk about what it was that we were going to do differently, and what it was that we had to get right in order to win this thing, because it was obvious, the desire, and that was always there within an All Black team. We wanted to win a World Cup, but we had to do things right, and we had to admit, firstly, that we weren't very good at World Cups. We were obviously doing something wrong, and that's where I think we probably reached the conclusion that these tournaments are separate than an All Black season, and while we go through seasons as All Blacks, we go out into the field and we expect ourselves just to, blow the opposition off the park, and that's what I love about the All Blacks, and we still do that. But come World Cup time, there's got to be a plan B, and we've got to, we've got to recognise that teams come and play differently than we've ever seen, and for reasons that we can't understand. To them, when we play against the French side in 07, when we met them, months before, and they were awful, but we've got to expect that, and when things suddenly go wrong in a high pressure situation, we've got to know how to adjust. There's got to be something we can go to, and that's what we talked about from about 2 years out from that 2011 World Cup. We talked about how things were going to go wrong during this tournament. We didn't know what they were going to be, whether they'd be injuries, whether it would be certain games where we turn up against an opposition that suddenly play out of their skins. But we had to be prepared for it, and the best way to do that was to make the team aware. And I obviously got asked a lot about the World Cup after we did manage to secure the victory, and we were asked what it was that enabled us to win, and that's for us, that looking back, that was the one thing. When we got to we obviously got dealt some pretty big blows in terms of injuries. We were down to our fourth number 10, Stephen Donald, bless him. He from outside, from right outside the squad, was in playing in your pivotal position, and then obviously in a final against a French side that we'd beaten in pool play, pretty well. I think it was by about 30 points, and we'd played them a bit in the year before and had good success against. But they came out and played a totally, a different game, and put us under a lot of pressure in that game. But it was as if we had prepared exactly for that game. And I remember looking around, even at sort of pivotal moments in that game. I remember waiting for them to kick a penalty that would have given them the lead, and looking at Richie and Thorny and guys that had been in these meetings sort of 2 years previously. And thinking, this is exactly what we had talked about. This is the sort of game where in past World Cups we would have panicked, because suddenly, this game plan, this attitude of the All Blacks wiping a team off the floor, it wasn't happening. But we were determined not to let ourselves panic, and it worked out for us just, and we were able to walk off the field. And stoked with the victory and achieve the success, and and aside from all that, it was one of no doubt a great experience, that whole World Cup. I did feel probably the whole time I wish I could have it again and just be a supporter, because maybe not in the final, but in that whole World Cup. I remember we were obviously up in Auckland before the game against Tonga, and the weather was amazing for that time of year. It wasn't a certainty, but it was stunning weather, and the support. And Auckland, as a city, not normally a city I enjoy spending a lot of time in, but man, it was crazy the support we were getting on the streets, the flags out, the silver fern flag everywhere we went. We were getting clapped into restaurants, even when we were going out in groups of 3 or 4. And then we'd get up to leave, and we'd leave to a standing ovation and stuff like this. It was at the time it just scared me, because I thought, shit, if we lose the thing. But looking back on it now, it was something, and I was proud. I was proud of as a New Zealander. I was thinking this is the way we should support tournaments like this. It reflects well on us. So. Certainly a lot of great memories from that World Cup, but the probably enduring one in terms of on the field is just that preparation that went in to those specific moments, the lessons we'd learned from '07, and how we managed to apply them to 2011. And obviously now it sort of comes around that another World Cup is fast approaching, and to be honest, I finished 2011 and thought I'd probably stick around for a year or two, and the Hurricanes were probably my main passion then. I felt we'd been through a bit in 2011. There'd been a few changes, and I was approached and asked to captain, and so I was pretty keen to stay around at least, to help the Hurricanes get back to where I thought we should be. And as far as the All Black thing was concerned, won a World Cup, and that was by no means my only goal or anything, but I felt if there was other guys that were going to serve the team well, I was happy to, move on or something. But as it turns out, I'm still here. I'm still enjoying. I'm loving the All Black environment still, and there's a bunch of guys very determined to do it all again, and obviously next year. And I think we're certainly having those meetings already talking about 2015, and I think it is really important that we've talked about not just recycling things and thinking it's all going to happen again. There was a huge desire and a huge hunger in 2011, obviously because it was a World Cup at home, but also because of the failures that we'd been through as a group, and we have to create that hunger again. And the good thing is it's certainly not going to be the same bunch of guys. Looking ahead, there's probably only going to be 3, 4, maybe a few more in the squad, but when you look at the side that finished that 2011 final, maybe 5 or 6 at the most will be playing again at the World Cup, so which I think is a good thing, because I think when we've looked at other Rugby World Cups, when teams have recycled virtually the same team, it hasn't worked, and we sort of saw the Spanish side in the Football World Cup experience the same thing, and it's just hard when you've had that success to just expect it to roll over. When you've got other nations hungrier than you, then it doesn't really work. So the good thing is, the coaches realise that. There's a great management group that are determined not to let that happen, and the players are aware of it themselves. So, for myself and Richie and a couple of the guys that have been there before, we know how important it is to have guys that are coming into the group with the sort of hunger that we had back in 2011. After that, for me anyway, I don't know. I don't know where things are going to lead. Personally, I've had an absolute ball in the last 10, 11, I don't know, excuse me, even think about it, 12 years almost playing rugby. Like I said at the start, I never anticipated that it would sort of reach these heights and certainly last this long. But you know, in saying that, I do still feel you know, I'd like to achieve other things in different fields as well. So where that will take me, I really don't know. I have been fortunate enough to travel a fair bit, obviously with rugby. Also outside of rugby, it's something I have a big passion for, and my wife and I have escaped for about 3 months. I played that World Cup final, and 5 days later I'd actually planned it leading in. I thought I'm either going to be celebrating and probably need a break, or I'm going to be wanting to hide because we've just lost. So I'd planned it a couple of months before that World Cup to leave. It was about 4 days after we had a parade through Wellington City. We were on a plane into South America where no one would recognise me from any other tourist. So and you know, we spent about 3 months through South America and ended up in Africa, and we did that again when I had a break from rugby at the end of last year. And that was, you know, it opens your eyes. I'm sure there's a well-travelled bunch in this room, but for rugby players, you know, yeah, we get a lot of travel, but it's totally different than the experience of doing it off your own bat, and trying to find a meal by yourself and not having a bus sitting in the hotel lobby, taking you everywhere. And so it's something I felt like I was missing out on it a bit by playing rugby, and you know, but fortunately, you know, I've managed to utilise it, gaps in the season, and take a bit of a break to do that. So that's worked out well. I'd love to travel some more, whether that's to live, you know, overseas and do something different. Because I do feel, as much as I've loved rugby and all the opportunities that it's given me, I've given it a good stint, and it does. You know, there are times, I admit, when I almost feel like I've missed opportunities. There's a lot of things that I would have done otherwise, you know, and travel obviously being one of them. But you know, there's not many game days I sit there. You know, I have the obvious nerves, and I waste away a whole day in a hotel, and I'm getting messages from friends at a wedding, or I don't know, boozing up somewhere on a boat, you know, and I just think, man, you know, I've done this a lot. You know, but don't get me wrong, I wouldn't trade it in for the world, but it's something. I won't be a Brad Thorne, put it that way, playing till I'm 40 years old. I'd like to achieve a few more things in my time, but anyway, I think I've spoken long enough, and I'm happy to take some questions. I don't know what the formalities are, but it's yeah, thank you again for the invite, and hope you've all got something out of it anyway. Thank you. The centre I've marked, I know when I started it was Sterling Mortlock was, and I think it was just more the timing of my career, because he was, you know, a pretty imposing player and probably the best in the world at the time, and you know, he kept me awake at night, put it that way. I remember before my first, you know, I'd play in the Wallabies the first couple of times, I was marking him, and you know, he was just that sort of player that I worried about a lot. But in terms of the best player, I honestly would say Richard Kahui was probably the best player. I know that sounds biased, and people around the world would not enjoy that answer because he's a fellow Kiwi, but you know, the times I played him for the Chiefs, and you know, just what I saw him doing, I think he's the best centre I've seen.
Anybody else?
Oh, well, sorry, I didn't answer the other question though. South Africa, easily, in terms of the team I respect. They just have a great attitude towards rugby that's very similar to New Zealanders. You know, I think play it in a similar fashion. They respect it the same, and when we walk off the field after playing them, it's, you know, we shake their hands, and you know, there's something special with them, which is, you know, Australia, England, these other great teams, but it's almost a little bit nasty sometimes between them, whereas when you play South Africans, you absolutely go at each other for 80 minutes, but then to step off, and you know, that real respect we have for each other is pretty unique. For me, it's happened for the last 3 or 4 years under Mark Hammett, and it's going to be a big loss since seeing him move on. But the good thing is I know Chris Boyd well, and he does not want to change anything that Hammer's done in terms of the culture that he's created. And it takes 2 or 3 years to really change a culture of a club and organisation. I think he's worked hard, and I talked a bit about he came in 2011 and things weren't right, and I won't go into that because it'll be another 20 minutes. But he made some big changes, and ever since then there's been a group of guys that have got a great culture. They work really hard, and I think not only this year but particularly in the next couple of years, while we have this same group of players, could be really good things for the team. It's a bit of both. I think every team you have your guys, talisman, that you really do rely on, and as I say, I think that's natural for most teams. But it's more of a collective thing, and I think we talked about it, particularly when we had a bad start. It was a hard start over in Africa, and we obviously lost our first 3 games. But we talked about how that can suddenly you lose your confidence. It's natural when that happens, and we're a side that plays best when we do have confidence, when we're having a go, and we're not afraid even to give the ball back because we back our defence, and that's when we play really well, and it's something we've concentrated on a lot in the probably second half of the season, and you're right, I think we've shown real benefit from it as a team, when we sort of have a bit of, it's not arrogance, but it's real confidence that we can beat any team on our day. And I think you match that with a good culture that I've talked about, that you work for each other, then that's when you get really good results.
Conrad's got to head back to, he's not allowed to train, are you? He's the water boy. He's got to be back at 1:30, so I'll cut the questions here.